Could the 2025 White Sox be even worse than the historically awful record-setting 2024 team? Let's discuss how that could be a possibility next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, or also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Garrett Crochet is gone, and so far, Austin Slater and Mike Tauchman are the major additions for the Sox. And you got a portion of the fan base thinking the 2025 team could be even worse than the 2024 team that just set the record for most losses in a 162-game season. So let's discuss if that's a possibility in the first segment. Then, if the Sox do not add a veteran starting pitcher, let's go over who could be the best internal option to be the fifth starter. And finally, are the Sox so bad that they don't even have an overrated player? Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So on SouthsideShowdown.com, I wrote my projected 26-man opening day roster, version 1, basically after the winter meetings. And some of the comments I saw in Sox social media world was that, man, this projected roster could potentially lose more than 121 games. Now, it is fair to wonder, because I know there's some out there that are like, no, it's not possible that the White Sox could lose more than 121 games, a record that they just set, a record that stood since 1962 when an expansion team, the New York Mets, set it. But it's a possibility. Never underestimate the White Sox ability to continue to keep hitting rock bottom when you think, well, they've hit rock bottom. I mean, this franchise specializes in finding new ways to find bottoms. And it still can get worse, technically, because the White Sox did avoid breaking the 1916 Philadelphia Athletics record for worst winning percentage. There's that. And please, if anybody brings up the 1899 Cleveland Spiders, totally different context, folks. Remember, that owner took his best players. He owned two teams. That owner took his best players and put it on the other team. And the team ended up folding. That's the only reason why they won 20 games that year. So the Sox could still flirt with even more dubious records. And one of the reasons why my projection got people thinking, oh my gosh, this team is going to could lose, like 125 games is, what if Luis Robert Jr. is traded? And my 26-man roster projection had him getting traded, because I do think the front office is so afraid that he has another injury-riddled season that, they're going to lose him for nothing. It's going to be another Yoan Moncada situation or an Eloy Jimenez situation. If, Luis Robert Jr. gets hurt, has another long-term injury, but can make it back before the deadline, because that's what happened with Eloy. But you could potentially have a Yoan Moncada situation where he has another debilitating injury, and then you got to just pay him to go away. They just paid Yoan Moncada $5 million to leave in his buyout. And Luis Robert Jr.'s buyout is only $2 million. And that's the only player on the roster outside of Andrew Benintendi that has at least had an F4 season of over 4. Think about that. Andrew Benintendi and Luis Robert Jr., if my research is correct, are the only players that have at least posted an F4 season over 4. I mean, this is the type of roster we're dealing with here. I mean, there's some value players, obviously, with Mike Tauchman's on-base percentage. You just got Chase Mydroth in that trade, who could be the modern-day version of the Greek god of walks. But when it comes to value players, that's one reason why you can believe, hey, the Sox might win 40 games or less in 2025. Now, obviously, there's still some additions that need to be made, but, it could trend towards, oh my gosh, this is going to be another historically awful season. And it's already going to, let's throw this out there, let's put the cards on the table. Clearly, the Sox are shaping up to lose another 100-game season, 100-game losses. They're going to probably lose 100 losses. Not probably, it's about, I'm going to put it at 98% that they're going to lose 100 games or more. But the expectation is please do not put us through another historically awful season. I mean, I'll give me a 2023 season with at least the arrow pointing up in this case, not pointing down like what happened in 2023. But there are a couple of reasons the Sox could avoid breaking a dubious record that they just set. First, obviously, the focus of getting players that get on base, should give the Sox more opportunities to score runs. The Sox had a 2.78 on-base percentage in 2024, dead last in the majors by 22 percentage points. And somehow the Tigers actually made the playoffs by being just ahead in the rankings of the White Sox, actually. But you can do that when your team ERA is fourth in the league. And you get super, super hot in August and September. But the Sox they didn't have guys that got on base. And simple Moneyball principles is to score runs, you got to get first guys on base. I know OPS has become now the fad and WRC plus, but at least going back to just the basics of getting guys that get on base might help at least give you more opportunities to score some runs. Might also give you more opportunities to hit into double plays, but at least you're getting guys that can maybe get on base there. And think about it. In terms of players who had more than 350 at-bats or even came close to like the qualified at-bats, Nicky Lopez led the team with a 312 on-base percentage. You're talking about the guy that you had to rely on to either be your leadoff hitter or your 8 or 9 hitter. Was the only guy that was able to get on base. They had two guys that at least had among qualified, like they got a majority, a bulk load of at-bats that had an on-base percentage over 300. And one of them is Gavin Sheets. So those are two guys that are off the team. But you add Mydroth and Tauchman. That should give you more opportunities for base runners. Also, Costa Montgomery, he's known for getting on base. And so is Edgar Carroll and Kyle Teal. And if those top prospects make the roster out of spring training or eventually debut during the season, hopefully that's going to boost at least getting guys on base. And if you get those three guys to live up to their potential, even if you get one of the three to be a rookie of the year contender, two of the three would be fantastic. But if you can get guys that, if you can get at least one of them to be, already, they hit the ground running, the other two could at least show signs, or maybe they hit the ground running too, but maybe two of them are just, have a solid season. Another one has here they are, they have arrived season. That could help too. Although you're going to have growing pains, but talent-wise, Colson Montgomery, even though he hit 214 in AAA, is way better than Jacob Amaya. Yeah, that's the guy who finished the season basically as your starting shortstop. But the focus of getting guys that can get on base is much better than the focus on run prevention that the front office had last season. Because the front office last season focused more on, let's get some guys that can prevent runs. Let's get the fielding. Let's play defense. Let's play fast, like Pedro Grifol wants. But it meant you brought in a weak hitter like Nicky Lopez. And Paul DeJong was supposed to be a defensive upgrade at shortstop over Tim Anderson. But I think the moment that Paul DeJong got here and was like, I got to get the bleep out of here, he just was more focused on hitting home runs. He was terrible in the field. Now, the defense, though, should be interesting. At least because another boost to maybe your lineup is if you get the Lenyn Sosa that you saw in September, that should also help your offense. But on the flip side, he has so many lapses in the field that could hurt you. And I'll talk about in the second segment about how the Sox are going to need the defense to be a little bit better this year because right now they don't have a strikeout monster like Garrett Crochet in the rotation. But to me, he's your opening day third baseman. And then let's also see if Brian Ramos, we're looking at, also we got to look at these things contextually, at least right now. And that because you don't have a ton of here's the Pacoda win projections. Here's Fangraphs win projections. Here's the, adjusted steamer projections, that type of stuff. But let's also see if Brian Ramos with some runway can help produce some offense. He gave you some glimpses there. But I think the biggest factor that will determine if the Sox are flirting with 40 wins over, say, 50 or 60 wins is the bullpen. Remember, the Sox blew 56 leads last year. And when you set a record for most losses, that matters. And the bullpen had a 35% save percentage. 37 blown saves. 37. Let's say you have it's down to 30. That's 7 more victories. You don't set the record. Obviously, it's a historically, obviously it's a bad, terrible, awful season, and it's one that you're discussing, but it's more 2023 Oakland A's and not you are now the new 1962 New York Mets. The other factor too to consider is variance completely went against the White Sox. I mean, that was one of the things that was just, and I remember everydayers go back, maybe, they'll hopefully remember when I had Jordan Lazowski on back in like August. If you go back to like an August or September episode, I had him on. He's from Sox on 35th. And we were talking about like, it just seemed like everything went against the White Sox. Everything. They barely would run into a starter having a bad day, or the opponent's defense just booting the ball all over the field. Because those are the things that do add up into why the old saying goes, you're guaranteed to win 60, you're guaranteed to lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42 that matters. They just never ran into that stuff. Heck, the Sox likely just tie the 62 Mets record if there's not a game-saving amazing catch on a possible walk-off home run. I believe it was Andrew Benintendi. I mean, that ball was pretty much over the fence, and I think it was against the Texas Rangers. And that guy, I forgot the guy's name off the top of my head, but he makes one of the best catches you will ever see, period. And Garrett Crochet cited that in his introductory press conference with Boston. It was like, what is going on here? Like, the luck, the variance was just totally against the White Sox. Now, next June, though, looks to be a bear just like it was last year, because that was the other thing. They had that 39-game stretch of schedule that was just brutal. And I think, that's obviously where the season's going to be lost, is in June again. But the hope is, again, that it's not, maybe you get more than, I think they only won like 7 games in that stretch. Maybe you win 10, 11, 12 games in the brutal June that they're going to have in 2025. Also, Will Venable hopefully is an upgrade over Pedro Grifol, because there were definitely instances where the White Sox had that record-breaking losing record because it's just how badly they were managed by Grifol. So, even if Venable is just a net neutral manager, that should help out in the overall win-losses. But again, it's going to be, we're talking about, I would say 61 wins is probably what this roster is going to eke out, unless they go out now, surprise everyone, and get Roku Sasaki. And, I'm going to have to see that before I believe it. But maybe, and again, if he comes in and he is the stud pitcher, that helps. Maybe they do add a veteran or 2 starting pitchers. That can help. Maybe they do make a surprise signing at shortstop as a bridge for Colson Montgomery. Although I don't know what's left out on the shortstop market that's going to be like, hey, this is definitely going to get us to 65 wins. And it's just sad that we have to talk about this. But again, this is what a rebuild is. And if Chris Getz would have been allowed to start the rebuild sooner, maybe you could have traded Yohan Moncada and Luis Robert Jr. going into the 2024 season. You could have, when their trade value, when Moncada still had some value. But I'm not going to project, obviously, the Sox winning 70 games. It's not going to happen. But there is a path where, at least contextually, it looks like the Sox should avoid a record-breaking losing season. Still 100 losses or more. But even if they have 101 losses, that actually will now be a sign of progress, whereas in 2023, that was a sign of rotting. Well, the Sox are going to have to replace Garrett Crochet's strikeouts. Let's discuss who the Sox could internally tab to be the 5th starter, just in case no veteran starter is added. And let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Saw Michael Jordan drop 55 at the old Chicago Stadium. Saw LeBron James drop double nickels live and in person too. And watched Devin Hester take a punt to the house, and it was amazing. Seeing a game live and in person is always the way to go, especially if you want to see legends play. And the best place to get the best deal on tickets is using the Game Time app. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. And I monitor the Game Time app for every Marquette basketball home game in case I can convince my wife to go, since I had to give up my season tickets years ago. And I've seen prices for a Marquette game as low as $1. Plus, I can get a panoramic view from the seat in the app before I buy, so I can make sure I'm getting a good, good view, no obstruction view, all that type of stuff. And with the lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit me 110% of the difference if I can find a ticket for a lower price on another app. Hey, there you go. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. Who? Can you tell that I grew up with the 90s Bulls? Well, welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Ty Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch a show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. Well, as everydayers probably have heard me say, and I know I've made my position clear, I am hopeful the Sox give runway to their young pitching depth that they have in their farm system. As I just pointed out in the previous segment, the expectations are super, super low. And also, again, there's only so many, figurative bullets in these guys' arms. So why waste them in AAA and AA? And with pitch construction now being advanced and the Sox actually having a guy in Brian Bannister, who helped Garrett Crochet. And who else helped Garrett Crochet reportedly? That Brian Bannister said on Just Baseball podcast, Ethan Katz. So maybe Ethan Katz isn't so bad. Honestly, I think Ethan Katz is a little overrated, and I'll talk about these overrated players in the next segment. But this team doesn't pay pitchers, so why not see if some of these prospects that are basically knocking on the door can be relatively cheap options for the rest of the decade? Because that's, you'd have team control over these guys for 6 seasons, so why not give them a shot? And then, hey, those guys can be traded 5 years from now. Obviously, that's a different show for a different day, but, it could make sense to bring in, a veteran, but, it can't hurt to see what you have internally. And Sox Machine's Jim Margulis did point out, though, that Chris Getz is going to have to replace 207 strikeouts in the starting rotation now that Garrett Crochet is gone. So that's another reason, though, to possibly go with a veteran route. But remember, this team is slashing payroll. And I'll get to, Margulis' work in a moment. But in terms of the starting rotation, again, I've got this on SouthsideShowdown.com. For sure, it's Jonathan Cannon, it's Davis Martin, it's Drew Thorpe, Sean Burke, and then question mark. So it could be the veteran options. And everydayers heard me a few weeks ago go over some of those veteran options that could make sense for the Sox to pursue. So you can check that out. But they are going to have to replace some strikeouts. And as Margulis wrote in Sox Machine, I mean, the Sox defense was very iffy last year. It was beyond iffy. It was bad at most times. You had Miguel Vargas running for a ball in the outfield and then just got knocked out by Andrew Benintendi because the White Sox, they just don't talk to each other and that type of stuff. So in terms of the Ks that need to be replaced, here's what Margulis has coming back. And he's got Sean Burke with 19 innings pitched, 22 Ks. Now, spoiler, as you can see, he's using last year's production. So some of these guys barely have done anything. Sean Burke pitched 19 innings. Davis Martin pitched 50 as he came off of Tommy John surgery. He just came back. But you got Jonathan Cannon, 124 and a third innings. He had 91 strikeouts and a 17.4 K percentage. Drew Thorpe, 44 and a third, 25 strikeouts, 13.2. Kai Busch, that's who he's going with as his fifth starter. You got him with 11 strikeouts. So you see the lower K percentages. And again, when you've got a weak defense, you might want to get some more guys that can have obviously swing and miss stuff that's going to miss bats. When it comes to Busch, his, that 17.9 again is off of just the limited innings, but he did have 100 Ks in the minors. And Margulis pointed out in his piece, when Busch came up, he kind of looked gassed because obviously he came up at the end of the season. He had thrown a ton of innings at AA and AAA. And I also think he had some nerves, especially in his first start. But he did have a 24.6% K percentage at AA. And currently, according to Fangraphs, his projections for 2025, if he had a full season, 16.7. Jairo Uriarte, though, is considered the better prospect. He's a higher ranked prospect. He did not get a start with the big league club as he threw 6 games out of the bullpen in September, but he did have 122 strikeouts at AA and a 22.8 K percentage. It projects to have a 19.4 strikeout percentage per Fangraphs. Mason Adams, who as everydayers know, I'm kind of a fan of him. I like a guy that can spin the ball, obviously. Didn't get a call up. He's obviously a more spin pitcher than a velocity. Had 110 Ks in the minors, 24.6 strikeout percentage at AA, but it dipped to 11 at AAA. But you got to remember, Charlotte is basically like Coors Field of the East without just the thin air. It's just how it's a bandbox for the dimensions and that type of stuff. Shane Smith was this year's Rule 5 number 1 overall pick by the Sox, had 113 strikeouts in the minors, 29.9 K percentage at AA and 25% at AAA. This could be the guy that they tab internally as the 5th starter, as he has to, first of all, he has to be on the big league roster per the Rule 5 rules. Although it's going to be hard to maybe keep him stretched out, as the Sox technically don't need a 5th starter until April 20th, but they could use him as an opener on the 20th and, give him maybe 4 innings, and build him up as the season goes on, if he can prove that he's capable of handling, going from AA starter, then AAA reliever to big league starter, on that, and that's why I think what it might make sense, if you're high on this guy, if you really like him, it might be better to just hide him as a long reliever. Now, the Sox could give Nick Nastrini one more shot. Had 26 strikeouts and 35 2/3 innings in 2024 for the Sox during 3 separate stints. Had 98 strikeouts at AAA, 25% strikeout percentage in the minors. But the command is always going to be an issue with him. He's got to prove he can command the baseball. One other option to throw out is Jared Shuster, as he did try to make the big league club last spring training as a starter, and he did open some games. He had 56 strikeouts in relief. He had 30 strikeouts in 11 starts for the Braves in 2023. But again, he's more of a pitch to contact guy. So looking at the options, obviously it would be amazing if the Sox somehow get Roku Sasaki to become the team's ace. However, again, I'm going to actually have to see him sign on the dotted line for me to believe that he's actually considering coming to the South Side. But otherwise, until Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz are ready, because that's where you're going to probably get a lot of your strikeouts, the front office might be better served going with a veteran or two that can obviously miss bats to help prop up the strikeout numbers, especially since who knows how good this defense is going to be. Everybody's saying Chase Maedroff has limited range. Is Colson Montgomery going to be able to field at shortstop? That's another thing. People are like, can he be a shortstop? He might be a third baseman. If Lenyn Sosa and Miguel Vargas are rotating at third base, that's going to be some interesting nights, folks. In that case, you might want the ball hit in the air, because at least you got Luis Robert Jr. and then Mike Tauchman and Austin Slater. And if Dominic Fletcher somehow makes the team, at least you got guys in right and center that can feel the ball. Although if it goes to left and Andrew Benintendi, again, go with God, I guess. Well, are the Sox so bad that they will not even have a player who will qualify as overrated? Let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and I always maintain FanDuel spreads, over-under, and money lines. They're fun to play, but if you want to win big or at least double or triple your money, FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures is the way to go. And right now, FanDuel has it at plus 350. The first scoring play of Detroit and Chicago this Sunday being a Detroit field goal. And if that hits and you put $10 on it, $35, just one. Chicago is at plus 410 for that same type of prop bet there, and $10 on that, and it hits $41. Chicago scoring first and it being a TD is plus 320. And you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more, cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And if you're in good health, they work with carriers that can get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. SelectQuote, they shop and you save. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all my everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. We actually passed 2,100 subscribers on the YouTube channel. Thank you for that. And I hope, more keep joining. Let's build up that community. Please recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. All right, so during production meetings, when I meet with like Locked On Reds, basically he's my boss, Locked On Reds co-host, Jeff Carr, sometimes, and I'll meet with other hosts, we'll kick around, who are some overrated players. And I realized Sox might not actually have an overrated player this year. They have overvalued players in Andrew Vaughn and Luis Robert Jr., but it's hard to say LRJ is overrated considering he does have an MVP caliber season in his back pocket. Maybe Vaughn, just because there is still a portion of the fan base that still believes he could be more than replacement level. Maybe he qualifies as overrated, but I would go with maybe overvalued because, the Sox are still hoping they can get something significant for Luis Robert Jr. Obviously, heading into 2024, you could say those two are actually overrated, along with Yohan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez. And you could say Luis Robert Jr. was overrated heading into 2024. Well, there were outsiders pointing out that that was his first healthy season. That was the first time he played more than 100 games. And Vaughn could have been qualified as overrated because there was still a bit of high potential there. But he is what he is. He's replacement level, folks. I'm done being on the Vaughn bandwagon. And I hope he proves me wrong, but I'm done. But I don't think, again, after 2024's conclusion, you can consider them overrated. Andrew Benintendi is overpaid relative to the production that the Sox got from him for being the richest free agent contract in organizational history at $75 million. And at one point this year, he was literally the worst hitter in baseball with his OPS. I mean, he was literally the worst hitter in baseball. I did see comments from a certain ill-informed part of the fan base. I've seen that they were upset that the Sox got Kyle Teal because the team already had Corey Lee as the catcher. An inflated belief in Lee should not prevent the Sox from adding another catcher, even if they have a better prospect option in Edgar Carroll. And folks, I love Corey Lee. He's my backup catcher, but that's what he is. He's a backup catcher. There's nothing wrong with that. You need a cheap backup catcher option for the rest of the decade. That's great. And if he does need to play a little bit more, he can be serviceable, but he's not the reason why you'd be like, I don't want a top 25 prospect because I have Corey Lee. Maybe the prospect hype is overrated, but come on. As I discussed on yesterday's show, we need a little bit of a ray of light. It's just super hard seeing who is actually overrated right now outside of the Sox believing Robert Jr. has high trade value when the rest of the league has basically said no and has correctly pointed out why because of his injury history. And maybe you could still consider him overrated just because thinking that he could be a cornerstone player when he's clearly a supporting cast player. He's a very talented player, but he shouldn't be the guy that you should be relying on to be your face of the franchise because A, he's usually hardly ever available, and B, he's only proven it for one season that he can handle being the face of a franchise. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow to discuss some things that actually might work in the Sox favor of possibly signing Roku Sasaki. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding if the 2025 season might somehow be worse than the 2024 season, who internally can be the fifth starter, and if the Sox have any overrated players. And you can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub or at Lockdown Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.